Salut. Could we just start to settle down and get ready for the meeting, please? Thank you. Hello. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Huntingdon District Council Development Management Committee meeting. I would like to make you aware that this meeting is being live streamed via the Council's YouTube channel. Please ensure that any mobile phones are switched to silent. So welcome to those who are watching at home. I would also like to outline some housekeeping arrangements. If you wish to speak, please indicate to do so to myself. To enable your microphone, please press the middle button, which will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate that this has happened. Please remember to press the middle button when you have finished speaking, as it is particularly important that all members use their microphones so that the audio can be picked up through the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding during the meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the evacuation point outside the building. Firstly, do we have any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillors Slade and Wakeford, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1, approving the minutes as a correct record for our last meeting held on the 21st of November and the 28th of November. Do we all agree that the minutes are a correct record of our last meeting? Thank you. Right, moving on to item number 2, members' interests. Are there any members that would like to declare an interest in relation to any items on the agenda this evening? Councillor Goulson?
Yaxley is my ward, so that's 3D. My ward as councillor. No.
Thank you. Okay, we will now move on to item number 3, and we will move on to 3A, which is St Neots. I would like to where's that put it? I would like to bring a resolution to the committee that the application that is before us, which is 3A, that the application be not determined because the applicant has withdrawn the application. As chair, I will propose that this item is deferred. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Dew. And do we all agree? All those in agreement, can you indicate?
1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And we will move on to item 3B, which is Stilton. I'd like to introduce Deborah Bell, our planning officer, who will present this to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So there are no updates to give you on this application and there are no late reps. So this application is referred to the Development Management Committee as Stilton Parish Council's recommendation of refusal is contrary to the officer's recommendation of approval, and the application has been called in by Councillor Alban. So this application seeks outline planning permission for up to 16 dwellings with 40% affordable dwellings, which equates to 10 market and 6 affordable dwellings, along with details of the access. The application is supported by an indicative layout plan showing how the number of dwellings could be achieved within the site and how the site would fit alongside the recently approved application for 70 dwellings to the east. Full details of the layout and design of the dwellings are to be considered at Reserve Matters stage, should this application be granted permission. Okay, so the site is considered to be within the built-up area of Stilton and was part of the former golf course. It lies within an area of low risk of flooding, which is flood zone 1. Go to the next slide, please. There you can see the golf course and the outline of the site. So the red line boundary includes elements of the infrastructure that also form part of the recently approved Reserve Matters application to the east of the site, and includes the access road, sections of the loop road, the drainage basin, and the extension to the rerouted public footpath. This ensures both schemes could be delivered independently of each other. Next slide, please. The next slide. Okay, so this slide shows the outline application next to the recently approved 70 dwellings to the east. It shows how the access and the attenuation basin all connects. So that's an indicative layout at this stage. Next slide. That's the existing, that's the access that's already been approved under the Reserve Matters application. Sorry about this, the quality of this plan. This is actually the nature reserve. That's to the west of the site, and the site in red. So that forms part of the previous section 106, securing contributions for its maintenance. Next slide, please. So it's a photograph of the street scene showing, that's the high street and the site beyond the hedge. Next slide. That's the existing access into the site, next to number 34 High Street. This is views along into the site to the west, and that's the existing access track, and on the right-hand side is the drainage ditch. So that leads to the nature reserve to the north. Okay, and there's existing housing, the ditch and the track along the northern boundary. This is views of the site, looking north towards the high street. Another view into the site with the boundary hedge, which will be the edge of the actual site. Okay, so 30 letters have been received from local residents objecting to the proposals. These objections mainly focus on flooding and drainage issues. Residential amenity and concerns have been raised with the proposals for an additional 16 dwellings, exceeding the conditions of the original outline permission for 70 dwellings. The representations are as set out in section 6 of the officer report. As stated in the officer report, the site forms part of the residual land left over from the recent Reserve Matters application, where smaller dwellings were approved, resulting in a smaller site area, overall site area is reduced and wasn't required. So this application seeks to utilise the remaining site area. This application has been assessed in consultation with HDC's internal and external consultees and specialists who have raised no objections to the proposals, subject to the imposition of certain conditions. And to conclude, officers consider the proposals would result in an efficient use of land and contribute to the economic, social and environmental dimensions of sustainability. The harm identified is limited and is not considered to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the scheme's benefits when assessed against the policies in the local plan and the NPPF when taken as a whole. Officers therefore conclude and recommend the application is approved, subject to the conditions set out in Section 8 of the Officer Report. Thank you, Chair, and over to you.
Thank you very much. We have 3 speakers for this particular application. The first speaker is Councillor Mandy Kisby for Stilton Parish Council, and you're on Zoom, is that correct? Can you hear us? Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions. Thank you ever so much, Councillor Kisby. Our next speaker is Councillor Tim Alban.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat my already documented objections to this application, but would like to raise the following points. 2.2 on page 3 refers to the 2021 NPPF and makes reference to applications being well designed, beautiful and safe places, and conserving and enhancing the natural built and historic environment. This application fulfills none of these criteria. When the Reserve Matters application for 70 dwellings mentioned in 4.1 on page 4 went to DMC, the representative from Cross Keys stated that the time for making suggestions was at the outline application stage, so I'm taking him at his word. I'm objecting to this application, obviously, But if the committee is mindful to pass it, I would like the following additional conditions to be applied. That before it is agreed, myself and as ward councillor and Stilton Parish Council be consulted on the details of the construction environment management plan referred to in 5.11. That should Cross Keys decide to make all the 16 proposed dwellings affordable and any SIL money payable is lost, that Cross Keys agree to make a financial contribution to mitigate that loss of funding. That as per point 7.35, any reserved matters application must include design features which limit the impact on the existing dwellings in Fox Covert and Rectory Way. Further, that any dwelling designed for or likely to be used by residents with limited mobility be located as conveniently as possible for access to the footpath leading to Church Close and the nearest bus route for the buses such as they are. And if Cross Keys would like to retrospectively volunteer this for other parts of the site where they already have application, that would be even better. Further, that the off-site contributions referred to in 7.75, which have been sought, are secured and delivered as promptly as possible, and that rather than being limited to the improvement of grass pitches, might also be potentially used for artificial surfaces. And finally, should this application be approved, Cross Keys provide a clear timeline when reserved matters application will be submitted and when the homes on this site will actually be delivered. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you, Councillor Alban, for coming to speak to us. You referred to some of your objections that you've already provided, and I think one of those was around the medical facility that's proposed. Can you tell us more about your objections to that, or your thoughts around that in the application?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Davenport-Ray. There's concern in the village whether this mythical thing will actually ever appear. There's concern that nobody in the health service wants to run it, that the local GP service won't want to run it, and that will be another piece of land that will go for housing. So Stilton will get all of the pain of the additional housing, all the additional traffic. There'll be no preferential treatment given to Stilton residents who are on the housing register for the housing, which would be all for rent. And then we won't end up getting a doctor's surgery or a consulting rooms at the end of this.
Councillor Dew.
Yeah. Councillor Alban, I'm intrigued. You've called this in, and I know you're objecting to this application, but you also seem to be encouraging the developers to get on with the one they've got. Can you just explain the quandary to me, please?
Through you again, Chair. Yes, I'm happy to. My concern is that reserved application matters for the bulk of this site was passed in March. I went up there on Friday during the daylight just to double check I wasn't imagining it, and nothing has happened since then. The applicant has got the funding for this, I believe, from the Combined Authority. They've got reserved matters application, yet the land sits there undeveloped. If there's a need for housing, I wonder why the heck they haven't got on with it. The site at the other end of the village, produced by a commercial developer, pretty much quite quickly after they got reserved matters application, work started and homes are being delivered. I'm objecting to this additional housing. I objected to the initial housing on the development, but that has been passed. My frustration now is there are people in Stilton that want to buy the part rent, part buy homes and can't because they're not there. There's been months when they could have started, and the people that are on the rental where Stilton residents won't get any preference, they haven't been developed either. And that's my concern of if these 16 are passed, we'll be in the same thing. This is why I'm pushing for a clear timeline when these affordable houses will be delivered for local people.
Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? No? Thank you for coming to speak to us, Councillor Alban. Our next speaker is the agent, Mr. Matt Hare. Just need to press the middle button.
Excellent. Can you hear me okay? Brilliant. Okay. Ooh. Well, thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to address the committee this evening. As you've heard, the application before you seeks outline planning permission for the erection of up to 16 homes. All matters are reserved apart from access. Members will be aware that the site lies within a parcel of land for which the council has previously granted planning permission for residential development, and that the means of access for the site is proposed to be via the access road and road infrastructure already approved in detail. The site comprises a residual element of land found to be unnecessary for the delivery of the previously consented scheme. It thus provides an opportunity to deliver a small number of additional homes on the site, including the delivery of additional affordable homes. The Council's growth strategy, as set out in policies LP2 and LP9 of the development plan, make clear that appropriately scaled development within the built-up area of villages such as Stilton should be supported. And in this regard, the development plan is clearly supportive of the principle of development in this location. And members will see that officers conclude that the development proposals are indeed acceptable in this regard. Comments have been raised regarding the resultant density of development, with suggestions that it's too high. This is covered at paras 7.2 to 7.21 of the officer report. It can be seen that the density of development proposed is approximately 18 dwellings per hectare. On any objective basis, this is a pretty low density. It's also absolutely characteristic of that of the existing housing immediately adjacent to the site. And it's a suitably low density development for an edge of settlement location such as this. Comments received have also raised some concerns for drainage matters. The surface water drainage strategy for the scheme sees stormwater conveyed to the large oversized attenuation basins that were consented as part of the 70-unit scheme. As can be seen from the officer report, the relevant technical consultees are all content that strategy is acceptable. And indeed, the council has formally approved precisely this strategy in relation to the balance of the site. Nonetheless, given the likelihood that the applicants will maintain an interest in the site once operational, it's of course in their interest to deliver a suitable drainage scheme, and members can take comfort that this is exactly what they propose to do. And also, of course, that the council will have control of this through the discharge of condition process. Members, all planning matters relevant to the case have been robustly considered in the very comprehensive officer report before you. The report concludes that the development proposals are in accordance with the council's development plan and are acceptable in this regard. I hope that you'll agree that with the officer conclusions and that you'll feel able to vote in support of the proposals tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions of clarification for this particular speaker? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you. I noticed one of the conditions for approval suggested is the creation and maintenance of the nature reserve next to this development. I understand how a developer might create a nature reserve, but how would you intend to maintain it?
Thank you for the question. So this is actually an obligation of the consented scheme, the 70-unit consented scheme, and it's part of the strategy that is required to mitigate the ecological impacts of developing on that land as a whole, which of course includes the bit of land that we're talking about this evening. Essentially, the planning obligation agreement for that consent required a scheme of enhancement to be submitted to and agreed with the council. That, I believe, has been done. And then there's a legal obligation for that scheme to then be implemented. And as part of that scheme, there's a maintenance program which shows how that land will be maintained on a rolling year-by-year basis with different activities programmed for different times of the year to ensure that the ecological enhancements that will be delivered on that land can be maintained in perpetuity going forward. And of course, it's an obligation that the developers are legally obliged to deliver. So, it has to happen. I think the implication for this scheme is that there's it's tied into the delivery of that project. But it's not dependent upon that project happening, because of course it will already happen, irrespective of whether these 16 dwellings come forward or not, because it's required to do so as part of the 70-unit scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered a little bit on the combined authority side of it. Is this deliverable without the combined authority funding? Is one question. The second one, are you applying for the combined authority because there were some concerns about whether it might end up being all affordable, which actually isn't a planning reason. But I just wondered on your aspects to whether you were applying additional funding. And is there a time element, which is, I think, one of the other concerns, that you're restricted to on delivering this from the combined authority funding that may or may not be there?
So as you probably know, Councillor Niche, although I represent the developer, I am not the developer. I'm the developer's planning consultant. I'm not involved in decisions in relation to applications for funding or otherwise. So I'm really sorry, but I can't sort of comment assertively on that. All I can say is that the proposal is made as a standard housing scheme with a policy compliant level of affordable housing, and that should be acceptable in this location. If it is acceptable, there's nothing before me that leads me to believe that it's not deliverable in that regard, but I have no responsibility for funding decisions, unfortunately.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, some of the representations we've heard from express concern around the medical facility plan for the site, with one of the representations saying that perhaps there's been no consultation with NHS England or the local medical practices. Has that happened?
So the medical facility in question, again, is something that was consented as part of the original 70 dwelling scheme. Unlike the enhancements to the nature reserve, there's no obligation sewn into that planning permission that requires that element of the scheme to be expressly delivered at a particular point in time. The scheme will not be delivered by Cross Keys Homes. However, they have been in pretty lengthy discussions with the doctor's surgery, and they've essentially agreed to give the land. The land is available essentially for free to the doctor's surgery, and they have also off of their own sort of backs, as it were, because as I say, there's no legal obligation to do so, but they've also offered to provide a sum of money to the doctor's surgery in order to help facilitate that facility coming forward on the site. But they will not be delivering it themselves, and it's obviously dependent upon the will and ability of the surgery to do so. But I should make clear it's not part of the scheme that's before you. It's obviously part of an earlier application that's already been determined.
Thank you. Councillor Dew.
I think I may get the general drift, as you're the agent rather than the applicant, on my questions. Obviously, you may have heard me ask Councillor Alban regarding his position regarding the existing application and getting on with it. Am I right in presuming that that's probably something that is more targeted towards the applicant rather than yourself, bearing in mind also the fact that you've already said that where the funding from the combined authority is concerned, that's definitely for them, and I know that's provided on a use it or lose it basis. Normally, it's not there in perpetuity, so I think that's the right word. I'm not quite good on those sometimes, but just your thoughts on that, please, would be handy.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, what is evident to me from the publicly available information that is on the council's planning website is that Cross Keys are going through the motions of applying to discharge the relevant pre-commencement conditions that they have to do so before they can lawfully commence development. And I can see that there's been some very recent decisions being made by the council in relation to those applications for discharge of condition. And you can see actually at the officer report, if you go to, I think it's paragraph 4 points, well, it's encompassed in 4.1, 4.10, you can see the list of discharge of condition applications that are being made. Many of those are dated this year, and I can see that some of them that have been recently refused. You can see the dates there, just dating back to October. So, you know, effectively not that long ago. So, you know, it's clear that they're making moves to do what they need to do to make a lawful implementation, but they've got to discharge all those conditions before they can legally do so. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. Yes, under 7.44, the lead local flood authority has said that they want you or the developer to produce a plan for the flood mitigation and drainage for the entire site, not just each individual bit. Are your clients happy to do so? And if that is put in as a condition?
Yeah. So the LLFA. So essentially, Cross Keys Homes has already prepared, submitted to, and had approved a surface water drainage strategy and foul water drainage strategy for the entire site. That was submitted at the time that the last reserve matters application was being determined, and again you can see that indicated at paragraph 4. Bear with me. 4.4 of the officer report. You can see that the surface water and foul drainage scheme was agreed on the 18th of March 2022 for the site. So there is already a site-wide detailed drainage scheme that has been approved, and it is correct to say that the residual element of land that these 16 dwellings would be delivered upon will utilise that drainage strategy, and that drainage strategy has been oversized to ensure that it has sufficient capacity to encompass, you know, surface water and foul water flows from those 16 dwellings, or those up to 16 dwellings. So that's a rather sort of long-winded way of saying yes, absolutely, that is absolutely what's proposed, and I don't see any issue with that at all.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
If we compare the original application that's already been approved and the application that's before us, can you give us a sense of how many extra bedrooms this will create? I'm just trying to get an understanding of how many more people would be living in this space if approved.
That's a good question. I don't know what the number of additional bedrooms would be. Certainly the outline planning permission, which was accompanied by an illustrative master plan, as these things always are, showed a scheme of very, very large detached dwellings, 4 or 5 bedrooms or more. The reality of the scheme that we secured reserve matters approval for is predominantly much smaller units, so 2-bedroom units, some 1-bedroom units, a few 3-bedroom units. Adding the number of bedrooms from these additional 16 dwellings, I suspect would yield a roughly comparable number of bedrooms, but I'm not sure it's necessarily a sort of particularly useful metric for assessing, you know, how many people a scheme might yield, because, you know, the number of bedrooms doesn't necessarily equate to the number of people that will be occupying a house, you know, due to socio-demographic trends and whatnot. But I hope that's helpful.
Councillor Davenport.
What is there a metric that would be helpful in helping us determine how much the population will increase if this is approved?
Well, the authority has data on average household occupancy for dwellings of different sizes. That's probably most clearly set out, well, as far as I'm aware, in a planning sense, in the council's developer contributions SPD, and it's entirely possible to sit down and add up all the different dwelling sizes that you've got and multiply that by the occupancy, the average occupancy levels that you would expect for dwellings of those sizes. I mean, you know, the average occupancy doesn't vary greatly between, you know, a 2-bedroom house and a 4-bedroom house on average. But of course, it's, you know, it is just averages. But that is probably the best way of estimating it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification from this particular speaker? There are no more questions, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now move on to the debate. So is there anyone that is willing to start off the debate on this particular application? Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry, are there any questions of clarification for the officer? Councillor Gardner?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, can you just confirm whether the lead flood authority have seen the parish council's comments with regard to their concerns with regard to flooding?
What we can confirm is they are on the website, so they've got details in relation to the correspondence that's come back and forth between us. Whether or not they are strictly being raised to their profile and said these are the comments of the parish council, I don't believe so.
Councillor Niche?
Thank you, Chair. I'll press it again. It's not going again, is it? It's just one that, are we satisfied from the conditions that we can put on to cover the lead flood authority's concerns, and that we can put some concrete conditions in there for them from a lead flood authority perspective? Because I just have a little bit of concern is that this is a specific application, but of course they're asking for the overall site application of everything to ensure that the accumulated effect isn't going to create a bigger problem than they weren't expecting in the first place.
Yeah, we're satisfied that those conditions will address those concerns.
Councillor Sanderson?
Thank you, Chair. Deborah, 7.76 talks about the green space maintenance. It doesn't actually give a specific figure, but I think that's going to be calculated from what you say in the report. But my question really is, who would actually maintain that site, that green space? It says could be passed on to the parish council, could be done by district, could be done by a maintenance company. Who would make that determination? Would that need to be assessed at the appropriate time?
They would need to submit a scheme to say who was maintaining that open space. So it's not actually agreed at the moment. Yeah.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just as a point of clarification, in terms of a Section 106, the point of principle when we consider the planning application is the provision and the maintenance of. How we go, the next stage involves then how we go about structuring the Section 106, namely that it'll either potentially be offered to the parish, to district, or that it will be via a maintenance company. But the who runs and operates the maintenance of does not go directly to the heart of the principle, but rather that we structure the Section 106 to ensure that we go through those tiers.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray?
Yes, thank you. In the application before us, the geography includes the access road, but I understand that the access road has already been approved in the previous application. Can you just clear? I'm confused about that. How should we be considering the access road?
Yes, the access road has already been approved. Sorry, is that better? The access has been again included in this application to ensure that either proposal could come forward at any time. So they're not reliant on each other.
But just a follow-up question on that then. In the tree survey, there's a tree right at the beginning of the access road, which is graded as B, grade B tree. And the tree impact statement suggests that it should be retained in this application. So how does that fit with the access road already being approved in the previous application? Sorry, shall I rephrase?
No, that's okay. Yes, so as part of this application, it's shown as retained. It's not actually a protected tree, so they could remove it without any permission whatsoever, whether we approve this or not, but it's actually being shown as retained on this scheme. Does that answer?
Thank you. Councillor Dew.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Devonport raised asked part of what I was going to ask about the two lots of planning permission for the access roaders. Wanted members to be aware that they do stand independently of one another, so either one could be delivered or both, which would be, you know, perfect arrangement if they were both allowed. I'm just thinking on some of the things regarding to matters that were raised regarding things like off-site commutation, etc. That they're going to be conditioned, but we're looking at some of the things, for example, improving the grass pitches. You recall Councillor Alban, when he was talking, asked about whether or not that could be conditioned to include sort of wider things like artificial pitches, so they would decide. Am I right in thinking that's more within the request of the appropriate officers in the, forgotten which division it would be here, but the appropriate, pardon? Active lifestyles, that's the one. Thank you very much. I've only been to 20 years and I still can't remember what they're called. So it's not something that we need to condition, but something that we could actually flag up that, you know, and I presume they'd be looking anyway and would come back to us if they felt that was a way forward. So it's not something that would be lost if it wasn't delivered as a grass pitch. Please. Sorry, let me press the button.
No, thank you, and a very helpful question. It'll come back to how we structure the Section 106 and the wording, but ultimately when we use Section 106 agreements, it is to make a scheme that is otherwise acceptable, and it must be necessary and directly related to the development and reasonable in scale and kind. So with that in mind, if Active Lifestyles have come back with a very specific ask, that is normally how we would structure the Section 106, but it does come back to the wording. The key will be that the financial contribution that is sought stays the same, if you like. What I would absolutely encourage the parish to do is to engage directly with our Active Lifestyles team to think about how it can be used in the future. That also links to perhaps questions about other financial contributions that you may have heard tonight, such as offsetting SIL loss, particularly for homes that are affordable. Just to be clear, SIL lies outside the planning system. It is a tax associated with planning, but does not carry any weight for decision making. So again, I would urge caution in giving weight to that as a consideration as part of your deliberations tonight. Clearly, the applicant will have heard other questions in relation to design matters tonight as well, and we'll consider those. But again, this application is outline only. And of course, design matters come under our consideration for reserve matters. But again, we would encourage the applicant through their agent to have regard to the comments made tonight. And then just a query was raised tonight about conditions and consulting on the construction and environmental management plan. Just to be clear again, as a condition, it wouldn't be normal practice to consult on conditions. They are technical matters. However, as with all applications for condition discharge, they do lie within the public domain. And if the parish council did wish to make a comment, they could do, but it would be wrong of me to suggest that we would consult upon a condition tonight. But of course, the comments are noted and the case officer will consider those in the as we finally tune the wording associated with conditions for the construction and environmental management plan. And again, just having regard to perhaps some of the other questions that were linked to funding, CPCA funding, and how the scheme will be considered going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before we move on? Right, so we will move on to the debate. Is there anybody that would like to speak first? Councillor Niche, thank you very much.
Just to kick things off a little bit, looking on purely planning matters, which is quite right, is what we're here to do, and looking on purely planning matters, although, again, at least the regard may be listened to from a different perspective as to what people would also like from a different aspect. And relating to the fact this is only outline planning, which leaves a lot of questions usually to be answered, but of course those questions hopefully are answered correctly in reserved matters. I did have concerns about the flooding issues on there, but again, within the conditions they're putting on, because that was an issue previously as well, not just on this one, but previously. I have to be confident in the fact that we will get that right, as we always hope to be confident. And apart from making sure some of the conditions are adhered to, which again is another issue we have, which isn't for planning matters, but becomes a planning enforcement matter eventually, I have can't see any reasons why, any on the planning front, why we would object to this, considering it's already got outline, sort of planning permission for most of it in the first place. So it's just a little extra being squeezed in. So I'm happy to propose that we accept this straight away, which is quite a quick one to go in, but I'm sure other people would like to debate it before we accept that one.
Thank you, Councillor Niche. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor Niche. I did have certain concerns about certain matters, but I feel that they've been laid to rest, and I'm happy to second Councillor Niche's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dew.
Thank you, Chair. Can I assure you, I chaired this committee for 8 years and I couldn't remember half the panel's name after the end of 8 years. And so don't worry about missing them occasionally. Yeah, no, I looked at this and it's one of those where, as much as you have feelings in certain ways, when you look at the planning hierarchy and the rules that are laid down and where we are at the moment, there's very few things we can do to object to it, and it seems to be with the conditions that the officers have recommended, it actually does the job it's supposed to, and I think it's useful. Also, it's useful with the officers' comments, and I hope the parish are going to take it on board that they do have a role to play in if it's allowed in terms of certain things that are coming forward. So it's not just a question of tonight you have an opportunity, and if they blow it, they blow it. There's an opportunity going forward there as well. So I thank the officers for that help there, because it obviously will hopefully inform the parish going forward if that needs to be. So I'll leave it there and reserve my right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I thought the agents actually answered the questions very well in some detail. I think that was a big help to the to deciding this application. And as Councillor Dew said, I think there's a role for the parish council here in terms of taking on some of the green space maintenance, the use of the formal green space contributions, and it will be delivering 10 new affordable housing units. There'll be 6 at market level. So I see no reason to object to this application, so I'll be voting in favour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, I think my main remaining concern is around flooding and flood mitigation. And I understand the agent's comments that the mitigation plan for the overall site has already been approved. But I do think that when you increase the housing density and add in an extra 16 houses, that changes the surface water flow. And so it means that that condition that we ask for, if we are minded to approve it, is the wording of it is very important. So I'm hoping that before we vote, we might be able to understand better what that condition would sound like in detail, if possible.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Following on from Councillor Davenport-Ray, I would have said we really want the flood condition to be as per 5.4, where the local flood authority requests pre-commencement conditions in regard to the submission of detailed designs of the surface water drainage of the whole site and details of how surface water runoff will be avoided during construction works, both to be agreed in writing with the local planning authority. And it's got the officer's response there, recommended conditions to be attached to the decision notice and secured at reserve matter stage. So if that is done, then I would be satisfied with that. But we also need to look at that in relation to foul water as well. So I think if that can be included, that would help.
I would just like to bring back the planning officers on this so that they can clarify for us.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the wording itself, obviously, I'm not going to be able to rattle off the exact wording here and now, but I think it wouldn't be unreasonable for us to think about the timing of when we ask for it, because with the reserve matters, unlike standard planning permissions, you read both the outline and the reserve matters in tandem. The timing of is set out in the outline, but I would suggest it wouldn't be wholly unreasonable to ask for a scheme to demonstrate the relationship between the two permissions. Now, we have to think of the wording carefully, because in theory, we shouldn't be conditioning matters that have already been agreed on another outline. We would need to have a look at what was approved in March and look at how that potentially differs, and then just think about how we craft a suitably worded condition about a scheme for drainage for this scheme and how it relates to the existing scheme. And then we think of the timing at which we will ask for that scheme to come forward in the reserve matters. It wouldn't be wholly unreasonable that, again, we would probably look at that around probably, you know, pre-commencement, if you like, bearing in mind that there will be other conditions that they'll have to address, and they'll have to build it into thinking about how they're going to design the scheme in any event and layout, for example, alongside the infrastructure like roads and that through the scheme. So again, I don't think it'll be wholly unreasonable that we think along the lines of a scheme for and the timing to be before development, and then hopefully, again, that can be taken away tonight and just thought about and built into the design thinking. Hopefully that does address your main concerns tonight.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, it's what we expect when they've condensed this scheme. We expect something else is going to come. I don't know if you recall, but in the first application, there was lots of talk about education. This time, we've had virtually nothing on education. And because we realise that these children, I imagine there'll be some from these dwellings, they'll have to be shipped out to Sawtry or wherever they can find placements for them. So that's always a concern that we need to take on board. And also, there's no opportunity there for locals to apply for these houses. I would like to see probably a condition, if we can condition it, that local residents have probably the first opportunity. I don't know whether that came in on the first application, but I don't imagine it is. But I mean, I'd done it in Facet many years ago, and when the opportunity were there on these extra dwellings, you know, be it only 6, that at least the locals have priority over those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. The scheme before us tonight is not being presented as a rural exception site, so therefore the affordable housing provided would be to meet the needs of the district and not limited to the immediate locality. I'm just quickly looking through the previous file, but I don't believe it was. It's not in the description as a rural exception site.
Are there anybody else that would like to contribute to this discussion? Okay. I would like to put to you whether you want to accept the proposal as it stands, or whether you would like to put a condition that the condition for flooding is a robust condition. I don't know whether you want to put that in with the application. Councillor Jordan.
Yes, and thank you to the officers for clarifying. I mean, you've heard from all of us around this table that flooding is the one thing that we're worried about. So I would like that proposal to be put in, that condition to be put in. I'd feel happier voting in favour knowing that that was put in.
Councillor Niche.
I think it's the proposer. It has to go through. I'm happy that, because I think I alluded to it in the first place. The concerns are on the flooding, and I think listening to Claire there, there is a difficulty, I understand, of how you word it, but I know they could word it so that it would actually make sure it is done pre-commencement of any of those. And hopefully then we can ensure that those concerns are alleviated as well. So happy for that to be in place, if it's conditionable properly.
Councillor McAdam, are you still happy to second that? Okay, so
Yes, thank you. I am, yes.
thank you. So we will put that to the vote. All those that approve with the added condition of a robust flooding assessment, wording in the condition. All those.
Sorry, Chair. So it's the approval of the application together with an additional condition. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. Thanks.
All those who are for the approval with the added condition.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's unanimous, Chair.
So that is approved. Thank you. Moving on to item 3C, which is Upward and the Ravelys, and our planning officer, Deborah Bell, will present that to us. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, before we go. Just for thinking about it, I should have declared that I'm council for this patch, but just looking at the applicant, I've actually worked with the applicant in the past. So just take advice on that. Just might be a bit tenuous, but
Yeah, I think now that you've announced it, I think as there's a sort of potential financial interest, it's just probably a statutory interest, and you should really leave the room, if that's okay. Thanks, and we can call you back. No, thanks for doing that. Then it's the right stage to do it. Cheers.
Thank you. I'll just introduce Deborah Bell to. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So there are no updates on this application, and late reps have been received and circulated to all members, which include the addition of a condition requiring details of street lighting, management and maintenance details of unadopted roads will be secured by a Section 106 legal agreement, both to be added to Section 8 of the report. So this application is referred to the Development Management Committee as Upward, and the Ravelys Parish Council recommendation of refusal is contrary to the officer's recommendation of approval. This application is for 28 dwellings with 48 affordable dwellings, equating to 17 market and 11 affordable dwellings. The proposals include associated infrastructure works and new pick-up and drop-off spaces and footpaths, plus improvements to the existing roads and footpaths along with drainage. The plans show a mixture of dwellings, with the majority being the small 1, 2 and 3 bedroom homes with only one 4-bedroom house. The site is located to the northeast part of Upward and comprises the informal open space within the existing residential estate of Farm Close, which has 51 pre- and post-war semi-detached dwellings. The site is right next to Upward Primary School. The site is considered to be within the built-up area of Upward and in flood zone 1, which is an area of low risk of flooding. Okay, so as you can see, the site and aerial view. The site outlined in yellow. We've got the layout of the dwellings with the mix as well, and there's a couple of bungalows in there as well. Next slide, please. So another plan showing the layout. Next slide. And this plan shows the improvements to the footpaths along the frontage, so it's all a bit small, and the addition of some more parking spaces along the front. Next slide, please. And we've got some plans showing the elevations There's quite a few. So they were the smaller dwellings, the 2-bedroom bungalows. Okay, so this plan shows the footpath connections that they're putting in along Farm Close. It's a bit zoomed in, so you might actually be able to see that from this slide. And the additional parking along the front. So there have been 11 letters of objections during the assessment of the application. These objections mainly focus on the surface water drainage issues, loss of the green space, amenity impacts and highway safety and parking issues during specific times of the day, which are the school drop-off and pick-up times. The application has been assessed in consultation with HDC's internal and external consultees and specialists who have raised no objections to the proposals, subject to the imposition of certain conditions. So I'll just go. So that's the entrance to Farm Close. This is where there's going to be additional footpaths linking through to the main footpath that links further through into the main part of Upwood. Yeah, some more footpaths coming in here. This shows the location of the additional parking bays to the right here near the school drop-off point and the school car park. This is views of the site from the school car park. And views looking down to the south along Farm Close, so the dwellings would go in here on this grass space. Oops, sorry, going the wrong way. Views looking towards the open space in rear of Barley Way. This is the open space to the rear of Farm Close. All this section will be retained as open space in the centre of the existing development. This is a view of the existing open space from Barley Way. This is the access and exit from Farm Close. So currently the school is accessed in here, and you can see the one-way system. So buses come in the other entrance, and then they have to exit here as well as parents dropping off children in the morning. Okay, so officers conclude, and having regard to all relevant material considerations, the proposals would contribute to the economic, social and environmental dimensions of sustainability. The identified harm is limited and is not considered to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the scheme's benefits when assessed against the local plan policies and the MPF taken as a whole. Officers consider the proposals to be acceptable in principle in this location and recommend the application is approved, subject to the conditions and Section 106 as set out in Section 8 of the Officer Report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We now have 3 speakers for this particular application. Our first speaker is Councillor Robin Howe from Upwood and Raveley Parish Council. Welcome, and if you just press the middle button.
I beg pardon?
Just welcoming you.
Oh, many thanks. Well, good evening, Madam Chair and councillors and officers. I want to start by talking about the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which is going through Parliament at the moment and says, I quote, "These measures would strengthen the government's commitment to building enough of the right homes in the right places with the right infrastructure and giving local people a greater say on where and where not to place new developments." And Michael Gove, that much-loved politician, has said, "We will put local people at the heart of decision-making." I would like to think that this principle is being respected in Upwood, but I fear it will be ignored. The officer's late reps report says only 7 objection letters have been received, 11 has been cited this evening, implying that there is only small opposition to the planned development. In fact, 23 individual households sent letters of objection to the parish council, nearly all of which cited traffic and congestion, along with the other issues of flooding and parking. 40% of the resident consultees, therefore, wrote to object. 40%. Surely enough to pass Michael Gove's test of public democracy. The local plan to 2036 contains the Ramsey Spatial Plan, which identifies around 900 new homes on 8 new sites. However, there are currently permitted development plans for more than 1,400 new homes on 13 sites in Bury and Upwood, 60% above the local plan target. There will, by the way, be 200 new affordable homes just up the road when Upwood Phase 2 is completed, which begs the question, are these 28 affordable homes really necessary? If these plans were accompanied by measures to improve the road systems and curb speeding, they may be acceptable. Sadly, each transport assessment supporting new applications in the spatial area conclude that the existing infrastructure is adequate for future demand. Every study, including Farm Close, understates the amount of vehicle movements at peak hours and throughout the day, and because different consultants are used to provide different assessment criteria, there is no hope of an integrated transport plan for the Ramsey spatial area, and this renders accurate traffic forecasting impossible. Traffic on the narrow winding road between Ramsey and Upwood past the school and Farm Close at 40 to 50 miles per hour, and the road is already extremely busy at peak times. Traffic from 800 new homes in Bury alone will simply exacerbate this problem. Local residents believe their concerns are being ignored by the county and district councils, and they and the parish council believe that the Farm Close development is unwanted and unnecessary. I urge the DMC to reject this product of unplanned cumulative development, and in doing so, send a positive message to the very local people to whom Michael Gove is speaking. However, if this application is approved, I'd like to make the following recommended conditions. Number 1, that there is an embargo which is made in agreement with the school.
Sorry to interrupt. You've had over 3 minutes. Are you almost finished?
Okay, well, let's leave it at that then.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you for coming to speak to us. If you were to suggest conditions that we might consider, what would they be?
During the building process for the new homes, it would be, I imagine, approved by the school, who would not like to see heavy vehicles moving in and out of the area where parents are dropping off and picking up children during the day. So that's one condition. Secondly, the fact that the play area or the grassed area has been depleted by about 80% would recommend, in my view, the installation of a play area at the cost of the developer, which would allow this small strip of land, which is the only green space, to be played upon actively by young children. And finally, one large request, which is basically an adjunct to my whole point about the overdevelopment and the overdevelopment of housing and the underdevelopment of infrastructure. We would like to see a 30 mile per hour limit between Bury and the end of the upward border to the south, which would be a 1.5 mile speed limit, which would reduce from 50 and 40 down to 30 as a extreme safety measure. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so thank you very much, Councillor Howe. Our next speaker on this particular application is Miss Rebecca Mashford. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes in which to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Chairman, councillors and officers. I just wanted to speak as a mum of 2 children, one who attends Upward Preschool and will soon be attending the school, and I've got a younger child starting the preschool towards the end of next year. We walk to the preschool twice a day, 3 times a week, and I have to say that traffic is a major concern from the proposed Farm Close development. I find it an incredibly unsafe walk in the mornings, and I think I'm one of few people from Upward who actually make the journey, because not only do you have to cross Huntingdon Road, where the speeds of cars and lorries and vehicles are just incredibly excessive. I think that's been highlighted further recently by a road traffic accident on the edge of Farm Close where someone veered off the road and into a tree. I'm worried that the proposed development will further add to the chaos and congestion around drop-off and pick-up times. I have to say that the photos that I submitted look very different to the ones in the proposal. There are just cars everywhere. People are parking all over the grass wherever they can, really, just to kind of jump out with their children for preschool and the school. So I fear that it's already going to be further accidents, as not only with the high volume of vehicles driving wherever they can to park, the visibility in and out of Farm Close is really poor onto a really fast-flowing Huntingdon Road, making it even more hazardous. And that's not to mention the additional danger and congestion caused by the construction traffic for the next 2, possibly 3 years. And I urge the DMC to hear the concerns of the community and refuse this application and keep Farm Close's valued green space. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Gawson.
Thank you very much for what you've been saying. Just a question, the photographs, can you confirm that these were during the school times, as in pick up and drop off, or is this anything, any other time these photos have been taken?
So these were between pick-up and drop-off times, but then I think that certainly well, actually both, because the preschool does after school and breakfast clubs, so actually the drop-off times are more extended than they might have been for just a regular primary school environment. They were taken at various times over the last maybe 6 months. So I just wanted to kind of show that it wasn't just sort of one busy day. This is how it looks all the time. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Jordan.
You might not be able to answer this. This is about the preschool and the schools. They're both in very close proximities, aren't they?
Yes.
Do you know if they're oversubscribed? Because I know in the past they have been.
I can't speak for the school, but certainly the preschool has had a large influx in numbers since the closure of the Bury preschool. And even though they're on the same site, the preschool and the school are separate entities.
No worries. Are there any other questions? And no other questions, so thank you very much for addressing us here today.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Mr. Matt Hare, who is the agent for this particular application.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening again, members. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to address the committee this evening. As you've heard, the application before you seeks full planning permission for the erection of 28 dwellings. A mix of dwellings is proposed, but in general, the houses are predominantly 1 and 2 bed dwellings. The applicant is the Bedfordshire Pilgrims Housing Association, a registered provider of social housing. The site forms part of an existing post-war, pre-war, interwar housing estate, and members may be aware that the wider site is substantially owned in part by the applicants and in part by another social housing provider. The estate as a whole is unadopted as regards its roads. The proposed dwellings constitute, in my view, a very logical and natural addition to the existing plan layout of the estate, utilising existing roadways on which to position new dwellings, along with the provision of new elements of carriageway and footway infrastructure. Policies LP2 and LP9 together set out the Council's growth strategy and the approach to new development in settlements such as Upwood. The officer report concludes clearly that the site lies within the built-up area of Upwood and that the scale of development is such that it represents a sustainable and suitable development for this location. In such circumstances, the development plan provides clear support for the principle of development. The proposed dwellings have been carefully designed to reflect the prevailing scale and character of existing dwellings on the estate, and the finalised designs have been produced as part of a constructive working relationship with the Council's design officers. The dwellings are of an attractive, high-quality design and will be high-performing in terms of energy use and insulation, etc. The proposals will demonstrably deliver a net gain in biodiversity across the site, and this is achieved in part through the enhancement of planting and the additional treatment of existing areas of open space on the site that are controlled by the applicant. The scheme will deliver a proportion of the dwellings as affordable dwellings, and the mix and nature of those dwellings has been informed by discussions with the Council's housing officer. They include the provision of a number of bungalow dwellings. In addition to the proposed dwellings, the application also seeks planning permission for the provision of a new dedicated pick-up and drop-off area to serve the nearby Upwood Primary Academy School, along with the provision of new pedestrian infrastructure and enhancements to existing footpaths within Farm Close. Concerns have been raised for the impact upon car parking provision during school time. This is covered comprehensively in the officer update report, but for the avoidance of doubt, the scheme does not propose to remove any defined car parking from within the site. Rather, it will increase dedicated school car parking and will provide additional ad hoc on-carriageway car parking for vehicles during school pickup and drop-off hours. All planning matters relevant to the case have been robustly considered in the comprehensive officer report before you. The report concludes that the development proposals are in accordance with the Council's development plan and that they are acceptable in this regard. I hope very much that you'll agree with the officer conclusions and that you'll feel able to vote in support of the proposals tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. We heard from Councillor Howell from the Parish Council concerns about the construction traffic and HGVs. Is there anything you can say that would alleviate some of the problems or some of the concerns that they have?
It's absolutely an understandable concern. It's proposed that if the scheme is to be approved, there would be a condition requiring a construction environment management plan to be attached to any permission. I heard exactly what was being said about the potential conflict between construction-related traffic and school traffic. So, peak times, pick up and drop off morning and afternoon, evening. You would expect a construction management plan in a location such as this next to an existing operational school to contend expressly with those matters, i.e. to ensure that there'd be no detrimental conflict between construction traffic and parents and other related traffic seeking to utilise the school at key points. And that would be eminently within the control of the council through the discharge of such condition.
Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I got a little bit word blind, as I do sometimes reading the whole thing. So perhaps you can, it's a clarification, but I'm also going for officer clarification afterwards. The road infrastructure that you propose to put in, is it not going to be adoptable, or is it that you're going to do it to adoptable standard and it's not going to be adopted? Only because I can't see, which is not a question for you, where we've actually agreed whether our bin lorries can go up and down there as well.
No, so none of the estate at the moment is adopted. It's all privately owned, and it would remain that would remain the case after the development. Well, whether the development happens or not, it would remain the case. There are enhancements proposed to the road, the carriageway surfacing, and new bits of footpath. As far as I'm aware, they're not proposed to be adopted. They would remain in private ownership. The matter of access by the council's refuse vehicles is addressed in the officer report, and I think there is reference. Forgive me, I can't remember the paragraph, but there's reference to essentially an indemnity against any damage caused by waste refuse vehicles to privately owned property.
Thank you. I got a bit blind. I couldn't find it, and then I was hunting through quickly. Just on that aspect as well, which again was a question I was going to ask the officer, but I might as well ask you whilst you're still there. What section of that road are you actually upgrading? Because I actually went left and realised none of it's particularly good. And reading through some of the comments from some of the other residents there, is obviously the road isn't particularly good. Is it just the section where you go in and up and round, or is it the whole section which goes round to the left as well and other roads? So I just don't know whether you could help me out with that. I will ask the officer if they could show the picture. Maybe they're aware of which ones. But
sure, it is shown on one of the plans. Whether or not it's one of the plans that was put up at the beginning, forgive me, I can't recall. But it is essentially the section of Farm Close that is on the right-hand side. The section that is on the left-hand side, part of it is controlled by BPHA, part of it is controlled, I think, by another. But in any event, it's just the section on the right-hand side as regards the carriageway that's proposed to be essentially replaced. In terms of the repairs and additional elements of footpath provision, that carries round onto the sort of frontage section of Farm Close and goes all the way to the far west side of the site, but it doesn't carry on sort of up into Barley Close, I think is the other road. Is that helpful?
Thank you very much. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you. In preparing the design that we have before us tonight, what consultation have you done with the school and with the preschool, given that they're two separate organizations with different timings and different people and types of people that will be using them?
Although I've not been directly involved in these, my understanding is that there's quite a close relationship between BPHA and the school and the preschool. The existing car park that the school utilises is owned by BPHA and is provided to the school, I don't think at any cost, or if there is a cost, it's certainly not at any great cost. And my understanding is that there's been sort of fairly substantial discussions between the parties, certainly before I became involved in the project, but I've not been party to those, so I can't talk about any of the details, unfortunately.
Councillor McAdam.
Thank you, Chair. To me, this isn't a showstopper, but one of the concerns I have about that area, particularly along Ramsey Road, is there's an awful lot of development going on along there. And in the future, there's going to be a heck of a lot more. And yet the road infrastructure is just the same now, basically, as it was in the 1960s, 1950s. There doesn't seem to be any attempt to improve the infrastructure road-wise in and around Ramsey. Just with this in mind, do you have any comment to make on that, given that, okay, this is only 28 houses out of goodness knows how many more, but every bit is going to increase the traffic along that road more and more. Do you have a view on that as a developer, please?
It's difficult for me to pass comment in detail on that. I don't know what, if any, highway upgrades are required as part of the strategic growth allocations that will be coming forward in that area. I don't know whether there are any upgrades that are incumbent upon those to the highway. But in terms of the application before you today, I have to approach it in the way that you have to approach it, which is you have to look at it, in terms of the impacts that that may be directly attributable to it itself. And clearly the level of development proposed is modest at 28 dwellings. The key arbiters of whether there is or is not a requirement for off-site enhancement to the highway is, of course, the Highway Authority. In this instance, it's raised no indication of a requirement in that regard, and indeed it raises no objections to the development proposal. So that is the situation in which we find ourselves. But in terms of the wider requirements, it's quite difficult for me to answer because I'm not particularly I'm not involved with those schemes, and therefore I don't know them sort of intimately. So apologies.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions regarding this particular speaker with just this particular application? Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, my question is about biodiversity, and it appears that the mitigation of the biodiversity loss hinges greatly upon the contributions to the nearby nature reserve. And in section 7.58 of the officer's report, there's a very specific number which has been calculated, 4.43% net biodiversity gain. Does that gain take into account the off-site contributions, or is this a gain on-site in the area that's being developed?
It's a gain within the site itself. So it's that the off-site contribution is entirely separate to that. The off-site contribution is judged necessary to mitigate the potential uplift in potential dog walkers, or just walkers, needn't be necessarily with dogs, at the Upwood Meadows Nature Reserve, which is a triple SI, and that's been produced in conjunction with the Wildlife Trust and the managing bodies of that facility, and the money will be used to sort of lead to enhancements of that facility. But no, the biodiversity net gain, which is obviously a sort of functional way of describing whether or not there is or isn't an enhancement to biodiversity, which is why you get these very odd, precise figures. That is all to do with land within the site that's controlled by the applicant.
Thank you. A further question, Councillor Davenport-Ray?
Sorry, many from me. Part of the report talks about how the new residents of this site will be able to travel using sustainable modes. What sustainable modes are available to people who would be living on this site?
Well, there's an obvious benefit to locating homes, in the immediate proximity to a school, because it means that should the parental choice be to send their children to the schools in question, then obviously there's a very clear ability to travel sustainably. Likewise, there's an ability to travel on foot or on bicycle between the site and upwards, although I've heard the comments from the speaker earlier on today about the perceived dangers of that, in particular the crossing of Huntingdon Road. Dare I say, there are public transport options, although I think all of us around the table are aware of the sort of very recent changes to that level of service in our part of the world. But nonetheless, they exist, and they're not incongruous with the sort of level of provision that you find in these sorts of rural locations. So there are options available to people, but I'm not trying to mislead you to suggest that people aren't going to get in their cars and drive places. That that will happen in these sorts of locations, and it's it is a fact of development in rural locations like Huntingdonshire. But I'm not sure I can say much more than that.
Thank you. Councillor Gorson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure whether this is just purely for you or it might be something we'll refer back to the officer as well. A lot of the concern is around the safety and again, safety during the high peak traffic times for the school, etc. Is there a traffic management plan for the construction and the timings of delivery, etc.?
Thank you. There's not a construction management plan in place yet. The proposal is that if planning permission be granted, then it be subject to a conditional requirement that one be agreed with the council. So the council would have input into that, or at least would be the arbiter of whether or not that is acceptable or not. I would fully expect that any such construction management plan would deal expressly with construction traffic and things like deliveries and whatnot related to the construction process and the interaction of those things during school time. So I fully expect that it would be addressed within that construction management plan, but it's not in existence as yet.
Councillor Brereton.
Thank you, Chair. The entrance to looking at this plan to the left is very narrow. Buses use it now, and it's only just 2 cars wide. You can have construction traffic using that as well. I can't see anything on here that you're going to change that entrance. Is that correct? And also, when you come out of the site, looking towards Huntingdon, there is basically no sight line because the road curves round to the right. Traffic regularly does more than 40 miles an hour along there. Very dangerous. I don't know why there hasn't been lax at turning out of there recently. Is there anything in your plans to change that junction? Thank you.
Thank you. No, the proposals do not include any changes to by the access on the left. You mean the farm close access on the left? No, there's no proposal to change that access. Again, I hear what you've said about the perceived safety of the existing access and egress points. Again, we very much rely on the comments of the local highway authority because it is the party that is responsible for maintaining highway safety and providing comment in that regard in relation to development proposals. As regards visibility, we have provided a plan that shows the visibility that is achievable from the access point onto the adopted highway. Of course, visibility is of course dependent upon, in some instances can be dependent upon highway authority actually maintaining visibility lines through the maintenance of vegetation and whatnot. But I think I'm right in saying that the clients have from time to time taken it upon themselves, or sorry, the applicants have from time to time taken it upon themselves to provide some maintenance in that regard. But it is ultimately a matter for the highway authority. And again, I return to the fact that we have no objection in that regard from the highway authority in terms of highway safety matters. I'm not sure if I answered all your questions there, but hopefully.
Yes, you've answered by doing nothing. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Tevlin.
Hi, so I'm from Finstadden Ward and I live next to a school in a new housing development and playgroup actually. And so my question is in terms of parking, being in the new development, is there going to be an issue with parents from the school and primary nursery actually going into the car parking space for the residents? Has that been looked at? And then the safety aspect of that, because I know that when there is that built up area and then parents foresee, oh, there is parking opportunity, they will take advantage of that, and it is then a safety risk. Is that considered?
Thank you. Just so I understand correctly, do you mean has consideration been given to the potential for parents dropping children off, utilising other people's parking spaces, so they're within their own private demise to do so? I'm conscious that it's a point that's been raised in representation during the ongoing determination of the application. it's obviously very difficult to judge what every human being will do in every circumstance, but you obviously have to make these judgments by your, I suppose, by your own standards to a certain degree. I'm not, certainly wouldn't use somebody's private car parking space on their driveway in front of their house. If I were dropping children off at a school, or really actually doing anything else, because clearly that would be inappropriate behaviour, even if it's perhaps not governed by any form of sort of civil legislation. But my sort of formal response to that sort of proposition is that the scheme is obviously at pains to try and provide some additional car parking for use by the school, and that's parking that will be entirely discrete from the private car parking that will be proposed to serve the individual units. And in addition, and this is really a sort of positive externality, I suppose, but in addition, there'll be extra lengths of carriageway, which will provide some natural holding space for ad hoc parking for cars. So, I can't sit here and say, people won't try and park on other people's driveways, because human beings do weird things sometimes. But I wouldn't expect that to be a matter of course, because in my experience, it generally isn't elsewhere.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions for this particular speaker, so we will move on to questions of clarification for the officer. Are there any questions? Councillor Jordan.
Sorry, put the slides back up again and show us how close the new development is in proximity to the school and the preschool. And also, could you show us where the additional parking and the turning is going to be, just for clarification? I don't know whether we'll see it clearly up there, but I'd like to know where the additional parking is for the school particularly, and where the turning is going. They're talking about a turning or a drop off?
Yes, so can you see my cursor?
Yes.
So there's some additional parking bays along the front here. So they're going to turn the verge into drop-off spaces. You already have the existing car park here.
Yeah.
Plus you will get, sorry, you can't see from this plan, but you will get additional length of roadway going through the new development, as well as there's 4 parking spaces there. So cars will still have the opportunity of parking along Farm Close as they do now, but they obviously won't be able to park on this private land anymore because it will be houses.
Because that's where I believe that people are parking now when they're picking up their children from school. They're parking on that particular field where there is a line of trees, I believe. What was the other one? How close is it to the school? I can see the school, but it doesn't mean anything to me.
So the school is just here. So then,
Yeah.
Sorry, the cursor's not moving. It's
That's
just
right.
jumping. So I need a bit of paper. Let's see if that works. So no, that's not going to help either. Thank you. Oh, a mouse mat, luxury. But no, it's not going to do it. It's just jumping over it. That the big block, the building there.
Yeah,
that's the
see it.
school.
Yeah. Is the preschool on that one as well? Because there's a preschool there. There's a school and there's a preschool. They are not attached. They're separate.
There's a separate building
They're on
at the
they're
back.
on the same kind of, if you like, that site, but they're not attached. The preschool's not attached to the school. You can see it. It's a building just set back.
We're just trying to find yeah. So that's the preschool at the back.
Yes, that's the preschool at the back.
Yeah,
So
and that has separate access and parking there for the preschool and the school.
I'm not sure it has parking. I'm not sure it has parking. No, you can walk up to it. You park in the car park. You go through the gate and you walk up to it. I don't think there is parking for the preschool.
Yeah.
Not designated parking for the preschool. But yeah. And I think Councillor Leash is probably going to ask a lot of questions about adopted roads, because that's a big concern of mine, given the potholes that are up there already. So I'll leave it there and let some of the other councillors ask for clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Councillor Niche.
God, I'm going to preempt me, Councillor Jordan. A couple of items really. There is just bringing back up the road, the road that they're going to replace. It's not replace. It's actually upgrading, should we say? If you could just show that plan on that one, because couldn't work out. Does it go all the way up to that first turning? So I couldn't actually see on my plan, and unfortunately I couldn't get online because it wasn't
Yes, it
working at the
does.
time. So
So-
just to see which sections they're going to bring up. The second one is obviously the adoptable side of it, and have we actually discussed it with our bins? Because there's a little bit of confusion. I can't find it in there. It could be because I keep flipping over it and not quite getting to the right paragraph. But I see we put in there a condition for the bins to be provided as one, but also a bin. Hang on. A bin collection point, which makes me almost think that maybe we're not looking at getting the bin lorries up there, which is potentially a future issue. So that's one clarification I could ask for, please.
Oh, I'm losing the plot. Yes, so at section 7.55, the bin lorry tracking details have been provided. So details of collection points will be secured by condition to ensure drag distances for bins are acceptable. So yes, our bins team have been consulted. They are expected to go up the new access road, and there's provision for turning for bin lorries within the new development. Was that?
That's okay. Normally it's in the section where it says consultant, and it normally has it in there as we've discussed it with the waste management team. This one just says the tracking. So I'm assuming from a tracking perspective, we know that that's going to be acceptable for the lorries. But then, of course, it needs to be the waiver, the damage waiver needs to be put in from a condition perspective, which I didn't see was in there. Again, it's something I might have been word blinded on. So it's the waiver that we tend to ask for anyway, isn't it? To ensure that if it's a non-adopted road, that our bin lorries, our 40-ton bin lorries, which also then covers other things like the odd fire engine, which is not quite as heavy, that if they do damage it, then actually it's done by the maintenance company, doesn't impact on HDC.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
My question is around the condition on the construction management plan. Do we have the ability to include in that condition the need to consult with the school in the preschool in developing the construction management plan, or is that not within our gift?
Thank you. We have looked at construction environmental management plans around schools previously. It's not encouraged. It's normally that we consult with the Highways Authority. And of course, we do encourage, again, applicants to have regard to the proximity to the school in the hours that they will propose to monitor and manage the timing of deliveries. But the challenge is always, and I don't shy away from saying it, is that getting deliveries to turn up when they should. With that in mind, we have to be reasonable as well. So for that reason, we normally consult. In the case of the public highway, it would be Cambridgeshire County Council, and we would encourage them to have regard to the school. And of course, our own environmental health team as well, around timing, noise, and that type of thing as well. But of course, the case officer will have regard to those same themes when considering deliveries in and around school times.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
On a different subject, one of the representations mentioned the local plan and expressed an opinion that there were more houses being proposed for this area than had been designated in the local plan. But from your report, I see that Upwood is a small development, and so it wouldn't have a specific number of houses. It's on a case-by-case basis. But can you just clarify that for me so I understand about Upwood?
Thank you. Our local plan obviously has a need for just over 20,000 houses up until 2036, and approximately 8,000 houses of that should be affordable housing. Just to be clear, when we do consider planning applications, it's not just about what we have allocated. That meets our minimum need. Clearly, where schemes are sustainable in their own right and having regard to the NPPF, they should be supported based on their own merit. So with that in mind, I do appreciate the reference to what's been allocated for Ramsey already. But again, the NPPF doesn't prevent us from supporting good development in locations where it complies with policy in all other regards.
Councillor Jordan.
I'm sorry to go back to the adopted roads. It's probably because I don't understand it. So none of the roads on this site are adopted. So nobody maintains them. Am I right?
The landowner will maintain them, so that's the housing association.
And do they? Do we know that? Can we have any enforcement on that?
So as part of the Section 106, we have a requirement to ensure that there's details of maintenance included as part of the scheme.
But only to that specific area?
That includes the main access as well, so that is the site, so the whole Edge Red as part of this application. So everything outside of that is still down to the affordable housing provider.
So just for clarification, because I'm new to this.
It's okay.
As planning authority, you can have you can't put anything over, so you can't implement people making them to make the roads. Because I've been on other housing associations where there are, plots. There's one, isn't it, Farm Close? That's just up the road from there. So there's Farm Close, there's Fairmead Close, which is going further from Upward, because Upward's there, the village is there. Then you've got Farm Close, and then you've got Fairmead. And they're all using Upward services and Upward School and Upward Preschool. And I don't think any of the roads are adopted. So you're telling me that a company will do it, but how do you get them to do it? Is it the residents that have to put pressure on them to do it? I just want clarification so I'm understanding this bit of it, because I'm not.
Thank you. No? Okay. No, you may be surprised, but in many scenarios, roads are not adopted in new estates. So it's not limited to what you see tonight. So the fact that it's not proposed for adoption does not itself carry weight. It's about the principle of roads being provided. With that in mind, then it falls to the management company or the landowner, and it's a civil matter between residents and the landowner in that regard. So again, for clarification, we've got many new residential estates whereby the maintenance of smaller residential roads does fall to maintenance companies.
So the scenario is if one of our bin lorries goes up that road and gets damaged by a pothole, as a council, we can take a civil action. Or we can go to that company for compensation to the vehicle. I'm just trying to understand this, that's all. Because obviously, the roads and the condition of the roads and the traffic on the roads is a concern for the residents. And so that's why I'm trying to get clarification of it for residents.
Thank you. We need to be mindful that tonight we're here to talk about planning matters only, and I am mindful that we are potentially straying into other matters. So in that regard, in the event that the road was unsuitable for a bin lorry, that would be for our colleagues in our operations team to make a decision on whether they would continue to collect bins. But for the purposes of planning, the expectation is that a road is provided, is maintained, and as raised this evening as well, in the event of indemnity, etc., that would be a matter between the developer and our operations team for bin collection, but otherwise future access would be for our operations team to make a judgment on.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Are there any other councillors that have any questions of clarification? Okay, in that case, we will move on to the debate. Who would like to start? Thank you, Councillor Dew.
Thank you. Yeah, this one interests me greatly because if we go back to a couple of iterations ago of the local plan, I seem to recall the county council at that time wouldn't support the development of the sites out at Upwood and the former RAF base there because of the lack of infrastructure and improvements. And since that, they've changed their position on it, which leaves us in a slightly unenviable position that they now think it's acceptable and have raised no objections on this whatsoever. I can understand, the residents locally being concerned about it, but we have to be guided by the Highways Authority on this. And on the main road past it, they have asked for no improvements whatsoever. And have said it's perfectly acceptable. So it's not within our gift to say that they're wrong because, we know how that works. They're the Highways Authority. They're advising us, not the other way round. With regard to the site itself, I always have problems with the adopted and unadopted, but the biggest problem we've got here, we quite happily welcomed the formal military housing onto the private stock where it now sits. And one of the things that we took on board there is the military housing in this area always had disgracefully poor infrastructure. The roads were never of adoptable standard as you'd normally like to see them. They're actually, very in many cases, much too narrow. We'd never agree to roads like that, but we have to deal with what we've got. So in terms of the existing stock there, and the fact it's in terrible conditions, not down something we can do anything about. All we can do is look at tonight what has come forward. Is it a good proposal? Are they, proposing the extra spaces, which I think they seem to be? Are they giving us the facts that what's been provided in terms of the new structure and access, etc., is safe and works? So the fact it's adoptable or not, as the officers have already said, is down to the management companies and then to deal with them. It's a difficult one because I do have a huge amount of sympathy here because I thought as I did when the previous local plan came through and it was put out because the infrastructure was so poor in the area. That was the right decision at the time. However, we live in a different world now, and the information we're given is, the County Council Highways Authority seem to think this is acceptable. So it's one of those ones again where my head tells me, my heart tells me I really want to say no to this for so many reasons, and every single one of those reasons is totally knocked into a cocked hat by the reality of the planning position we're in. We have our local plan, which, as the officers have already said, is not a absolute maximum. It's the minimum we should be looking for. And if other opportunities come along, we have to consider them rightly or wrongly and then decide upon that. The authorities we have to refer to on the highways have said they can see no problems with it whatsoever. And I again, as we've had in the past, rather than thinking of reasons why I should be accepting it, I can think of no reasons why we would not accept it, which is a backwards position, but it's the one we're in. So I'll leave it there at the minute rather than making a proposal. If you want to come back to me after a few more people have spoken, I'll happily do something for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duke. Councillor Niche.
I knew I put my hand up too quickly again. I think, first of all, I'd like to thank those that came to speak today, from the parish council as well as the residents, because I do think Upwood and Ramsey, just further afield, have been let down for transportation issues for a number of years. And I know we as a district council, and will continue to do so, I'm sure, will still try to keep pushing that with both the county council and the combined authority. But moving on from that, I think one thing they ought to consider is also, when something like this goes in, is with the SIL money coming through as well, they ought to consider seriously as to whether they utilise that for some improvements themselves through a local highway improvement bid, and I'm sure they'll be supported with that to try and move that through. I did have concerns about adoption, non-adoption. I do understand the perspective of there are many locations which are unadoptable. You just hope they make it to adoptable standards so that we don't end up with the problems. But I think with this one specifically, as Councillor Dewars mentioned, that the road is very narrow. But I'm assuming the lorries get up there already to collect the bins, although one shouldn't assume. If not, then there'll have to be a collection area, which again has been put into there, which is not ideal. But like Councillor Gill, I've also had problems looking at other areas saying, well, the Highways Authority don't have an issue with it, even though we seem to, but we're not the experts in that area. I think it's the stuff that's probably off the site application that's the main issue. So again, I agree. I looking through this, I think it's it's a good location. It's a good utilisation of land. Unfortunately, there will be a loss of green space, but I think it is hopefully will be improved with other things in that area. So again, I'm happy to listen to the debates and happy to second when it gets round to that point if needed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not really sure the issue of road adoption is that much of a problem. I mean, the whole of Alconbury Weald is unadopted, for example. There's about 800 houses there, so not quite the same situation perhaps as we got here. But I think that the bin lorries will be able to collect, and as Clara said, that'll be a matter for our operations colleagues. I do have a lot of sympathy with the parish and the speakers about the transport issues. And just to pick up on what Councillor Niche said, I think the local highway initiative improvement scheme probably would help a lot. I think the deadline is actually the 6th of January, so the parish council need to get going with that. What I think we do need to do, though, is to keep a close eye on the construction management plan and ensure that there's not that potential issue on the side, as it's near to a preschool and an existing school. One point I perhaps should have made when we're asking for clarification is I noticed Councillor Howell said something about the loss of the green space, and would there be something in the 106 that we could put in that would mitigate that and allow facilities for sort of young people in that upward?
Planning officers, could you clarify that for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. By nature of the scale of the development, it doesn't really meet the threshold for the provision of open space, certainly a local equipped play area. So for that reason, the recommendation is as proposed.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we've gone a little bit bogged down on this one, I feel. To me, it looks as though it's just a part of a small estate that was never finished off. So actually, I think it fits in quite well. I, like everyone else, is very concerned about the drop-off times and pick-up times, obviously, for the school. And I think all we can do is rely on our officers to make sure they have a robust transport plan. Obviously, that's all all of us are concerned about that, the safety issues. But apart from that, I quite like the design. It's a finishing off of a small estate close to the school. There are benefits. Obviously, we've got the affordable. There's 15,000 going to the Upward Cricket Club potentially. Not that that'll go far, we know today, but at least it's as much, I feel, as Clara said, as we can get out of the job. So with that in mind, I will propose it, Chairman, if you're happy to take that and to agree and go along with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Dew.
I'll second that, so you got that on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak before we take a vote? Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, I'm thankful to the councillors around the table who are more experienced than me on this. And I agree with what Councillor Dew said. Your heart's saying something, but your head is telling you there's no reason. It is well thought out. But I suppose one does have concerns where there is a small school where I know parents walk their children to school and the pavements are very small there. I'm regularly there because my granddaughter goes to school there, so I see the problems that the residents do see. But I am pleased that they've got additional parking there for drop-offs, and I can see they are trying to mitigate some of the concerns. I just think it's a very difficult one, this one. Very.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
One of the things the agent mentioned is that the existing car park is used by the school as a gift from BPHA. That's not a requirement. And I'm wondering if there are any conditions we can consider that would enable the school to have longevity of knowledge that they will be able to continue to use that car park.
That car park is outside of this site, so we can't secure the use of that.
Thank you. If there are no other comments for this particular debate, we will take the proposal by Councillor Butler and seconded by Councillor Dew to approve this in line with the recommendations of the officer. All those for approval, please show your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 13.
And anyone against?
1. So that's approved, Chair.
Thank you. That has been approved. We will just take a 5-minute break and then we will come back. me his apologies. Thank you. So we will continue with the agenda on point 4D, which is Yaxley, and I'll introduce our planning officer, Deborah Bell, to present that to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There are no updates on this application and there were no late reps. The application is referred to the Development Management Committee as Yaxley Parish Council's recommendation of refusal is contrary to the officer's recommendation of approval. This application seeks the retention and continued business use of 2 porter cabins for a taxi business and car sales business with a toilet building and valeting building for a temporary period of 5 years. The uses provide employment for 3 full-time workers. The site is located within Broadway Business Park in Yaxley, and to the east is the Main Line Railway. The site is within Flood Zone 1. The applicant is applying for a further temporary permission due to the current uncertainty in the market and the general economic conditions, and whilst they find a permanent solution for their business needs. No letters of objection were received during the course of the application. The main concerns of the Parish Council are that the temporary permission has previously been granted and a permanent solution should be found as set out in section 5 of the officer report. Should we go through some slides? So this is the site, the hatched area. Next slide, please. It's an aerial view. You can see the parking forecourt, taxi, porter cabin. Next slide. This is the site, including the access. Next slide, please. It's the layout of the site. And a plan showing the buildings to be retained for part of the use. So this application has been assessed in consultation with HDC's internal and external consultees, and specialists have raised no objections to the proposals, subject to the imposition of certain conditions, in particular securing the maintenance of the toilet block. To conclude, officers consider the proposals to be acceptable in this location for a further temporary period and recommend the application is approved subject to conditions set out in section 8 of the report. So here's some photos of the site. You can see the porter cabin that's used for the taxi business. That's the toilet building. That's the car sales porter cabin, which is tucked right at the back of the site. Sales area leading out to the access on the main road. A view of other uses in the vicinity. You've got the hand car wash opposite. Okay, that's it. Let's just go back to this one, and you can see there are other portable buildings, office buildings, and the adjacent site. Thank you. Over to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker for this particular application, so I'd like to invite Councillor Andrew Wood to address the committee.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak this evening. As you will be aware, the original application for this came up in November 2014 for office use and a taxi office. This was then replaced by an application in April the following year, 2015, for office use and car sales. This most recent application, some 5 years later, unfortunately, the Parish Council cannot support the application, as the initial approval was for a temporary building to allow the construction of a permanent building, with the temporary building removed after a maximum of 5 years. This application, 8 months after the expiry of that 5-year period, seeks another 5 years in which to presumably not build a permanent building. We are disappointed that during the period to date, there's been no planning application for that permanent building. For that reason, we do not support it.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Are there any questions for the councillor? No, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
So are there any questions of clarification to our planning officer? Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question on temporary buildings and extensions, etc., etc. I suppose from my aspect, I'm looking at it and thinking we've given them 5 years and nothing. Now we're going to give them another 5 years, and in 5 years' time, we're giving them another 5 years. My first question is, does it have to be 5 years? Can it be less? And is there any way we can actually really push them into saying, look, you've had your 5 years, here's another 2, maybe 3, put something in, put some permanent planning application in, because I just think it is, yes, not playing it with a straight bat if we go back to the previous application for cricket grounds.
Really thrown me now with the cricket grounds. Yeah, sorry, I had a response in my head then. Yes, so with regards to making them apply for a permanent buildings, we can't do that. As each application is assessed on its own merits. So at the end of the period, their permission would fall away. What we could do is add an informative to advise them that they should be seeking permanent buildings before the expiry of the application. Does that answer everything?
So yeah, it temporary answers it. Sorry, puns are going there. But does it have to be 5 years, or is that because they've applied for 5 years, or can we say you can get it for 2 years? So that's my question.
Thank you. In theory, if you wish to consider a shorter period of time, you can do, but critically, it's the reasons for it. So what I will say is, just by virtue of the fact that they've had one permission is not in itself a reasonable position to take in suggesting that 5 years is not acceptable. Clearly, there's a number of factors that could be at play here. They have applied for 5 years. Again, if you feel that it should be for less than 5 years, you will need to have good reason as to why you're considering that, recognising that they can appeal the condition in itself, should they choose to do so.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, Deborah, in your report, you conclude that the officers are of the view that a further temporary consent could be supported. Have you received any evidence or any reason for you to believe that the applicant is currently working on a permanent application, or is that something you would not take into account when you are considering this application?
We wouldn't take it into account, but they have provided a statement to say that a basic statement to say that due to current climate, they're assessing their business needs, but just want to continue with the use of the site until they've established what they're going to do.
Councillor McAdam.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. If we were to approve this, would we be able to put in as a condition that during the next 5 years, they must put in planning permission for a permanent building?
So that requirement, it wouldn't be reasonable or meet the test for conditions. What we would have to do is, there are so many factors around whether the business would retain on that site. All we could do is add an informative. But it is unlikely that a further temporary consent would be granted.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Your report includes that the original temporary approval was approved in April 2015. So that means it would have expired, I'm guessing, in April 2020. So that means that they've had 2.5 years since the original 5 years expired. Would that be a reasonable reason for us to reduce the 5-year extension? They will have had 2.5 years already.
Thank you. In short, no. Essentially, you have to consider the application before you on its own merits. As you go into the debate, what I would ask you to bear in mind as you go forward is the conversation tonight has been centred around if they're going to put forward a new permission, have regard to the timescales to prepare an application, to submit it be considered, but notwithstanding the fact that any permission would have a 3-year implementation period, and in the event you were looking to shorten that through other channels, that would be considered unreasonable. So again, I would encourage you to have regard to overall timelines for a new application. Yes, they could have put in a planning application, they didn't, and for that reason we have the application before us now.
Are there any other questions of clarification before we move on to the debate? As there are no other questions, we'll move on to the Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Sorry, last minute question. So some of my colleagues have asked it if we're able to suggest a less than 5-year approval. Are there any other options open to us?
If I could just come in on this point again, I'm a little unsure of the question or the rationale for the question. So what I would encourage is that we focus on the application in front of it. Should you consider a shorter timeline, then that is something we can consider and work with you on, but it's having the reasons for that, bearing in mind the timeline against a new planning application has already described.
Okay, we will move on to the debate. Who will start off that? Thank you, Councillor Goulson.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at this, just so that we're aware, the case number on this is year 20, so they did put the application in after 5 years, and so it's taken 2 years to get this far. So when we listen to what Clara Kerr has mentioned earlier, the time limit on taking this through, while I would like to suggest a shortening of the 5-year period and base it on the environmental health about the toilet and the complaints and the objections there. I think even if they put it in tomorrow, it would still be a short chance of completion. So although I'm going against a Yaxley resident and fellow councillor, at this point, if you're ready to accept a proposal, I'll say proposing this one, but if we can put in strongest terms, if there is possible, that we do need to see some movement on a build.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I feel that the parish council has got it right, actually. They really only deserve the 5 years they've had. It's all summed up in 7.13 on page 112. If you read all that paragraph there, it really sums up pretty much everything about it. Temporary consent is generally not acceptable. It should be permanent redevelopment. They say there's uncertainty in the market. Well, I don't think there is, because every guy I know that's got a garage has done a marvellous since COVID. They've sold so many cars, they've run out. So I don't accept that there's uncertainty in the market. I admit the porter cabin where they have their sales, they have summed that up quite a bit, and that is quite presentable as it is. But as far as the taxi side goes, that is a bit of an eyesore. I'm generally not happy with this, but I appreciate we are where we are. And I think we've got to give them another 5 years with a stipulation, as it says in here. It would be advisable for the applicant to use the additional time to find a permanent solution, as it's unlikely that a further consent could be supported. I think that needs stressing very strongly, that we're not going to keep, because these boys are just going to keep going on and on doing the same old thing every 5 years. You can see what's coming. It's a bit of an eyesore going into the village with the taxi side. When you look at the other side of the road, you've got Junction 17 and people like that are, well, it's like an hotel. And this is not really acceptable to go on any longer. I accept, and I will second Councillor Gulson's proposal, but I'm not happy with it for those reasons that I've stated, and I think they are slightly taking the mickey here, and it needs stressing that this is it. This is they've reached the end of the line. If they're not happy with that site, if it's too costly to install proper toilets, then they need to probably consider there's a whole new development the other side of the road where there is ample space. It's a terrific industrial area. It would suit them down to the ground. But obviously they don't want to spend any money. So I'll second it, Chairman, but you know, that's my thoughts on it anyway.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Niche.
I think the applicant, who probably won't be listening but may well be, ought to listen to what we're saying. And I think it is that one of getting that information, because I totally agree with both especially the local councillors up there as well. You know, they must sense the frustration that we've got. And I think you are right. As much as I'd like to say, halve it, it won't happen. It's an ongoing concern which is clearly operating. But let's tell them, you know, our expectation is that is your 5 years to put that application in and get it passed within that 5 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously, we can't say it's going to get passed.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I think Councillor Gulson's point is really important. If we were to try to shorten the amount of time, given the length of time it takes for planning applications to go through the system, it would probably be quite unreasonable. And there are lots of things I don't like about this application, especially section 7.18, where we talk about overall the proposal is considered to respond positively to its context within the surrounding built form. And I disagree with that. But yeah, I don't see a reason. There will always be uncertainties in the market. There were uncertainties in the market 5 years ago, and there will be in 5 years from now. So I don't consider that to be a reasonable decision for us to ever consider it again. And so I agree with Councillor Butler to try to make our wording as robust as possible, that if this should come back again, that it would be very unlikely to be approved. Thank you.
Are there any other comments to be made? If not, we will take Councillor Gulson's and proposal that we approve with a statement that shows that we want them to look at a permanent property in the future. If we can put that through, and I'll take Councillor Butler as a seconder. All those that agree with this proposal, please raise your hands.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13. That's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, thank you. That is approved. So we move on to item 4, which is the appeal decisions, and we will go to our planning officer, Julie Kerr, to report to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As listed, there were 4 appeals in the last month. There is one appeal which is slightly strange, and that is the appeal for 5 Crown Street, which is a listed building application and a planning application for the same site. The listed building application in this sense was allowed. That meant that the inspector considered that the extension as proposed was in keeping with the listed building, and therefore disagreed with our assessment associated with the impact of the development on the listed building. On the planning application side, because the planning application wasn't supported by a flood risk assessment, the inspector took the view that the sequential test hadn't been passed with regard to the application in its assessment, and therefore dismissed that part of the appeal. So that just explains that actual sort of strange appearance in relation to the appeals record. But the other two applications that were before the inspector were dismissed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that takes us to the end of our agenda. I would like to thank everyone for their attendance and contribution this evening. Thank you also to the planning officers for your hard work in presenting the applications this evening. Lastly, I'd like to wish everyone a safe and peaceful Christmas and a happy New Year. Thank you.